Howdy, fellow citizens of the digital agora. Uncle Diogenes is back once again with his lamp, cell phone. Here's a little bit of a different piece. My original work I call, the flower blooming in an unusual way. The invitation. There are moments in a life when a human being becomes so aligned with what they're doing that the distinction between effort and expression disappears. Most people watching see achievement, a win, a score, a finish line crossed. I have become fascinated by something else, something quieter, and I think older. I've become fascinated by the flower blooming in an unusual way. This isn't about fame. It isn't about winning. And it isn't about perfection. Those are the words we've been handed to measure things with, and they measure the wrong things. What I'm talking about is a rarer than winning. It's a moment when a person is fully alive, when the doing and the being stop being two different things. The first flower I noticed recently bloomed inside a kickboxing ring. Act 1, Poetry in Motion. Her name is Mona Kimura. And I want to be clear about what caught me, because it wasn't the win. It was the joy. It was the fluency, offense and defense. Stopped being separate decisions she was making and became one continuous sentence her body was speaking. There was no seam where the block ended and the counter began. That's rare. That's a flower blooming in a place most of us only think to look for violence. And once you learn to see it, you start seeing it everywhere. I see it in my cousin on a basketball court. When the game stops being a series of drills, she memorized and becomes something closer to conversation. The ball leaves her hand before her mind finishes the sentence, and it's still right. She played professional ball and for the University of Michigan. I see it in Usain Bolt. Mid-race, when the sprint stops being effort and starts being release. See it in Phelps, where the water stops being resistance and becomes a second set of lungs. See it in Lindsey Sterling, bow and body and rhythm refusing to be three things. And I know some of you won't like this one, but I see it in Taylor Swift, commanding 60,000 people like she's speaking to one. Different arenas, same flower. I'll give it a name, the cultivar of humanity. Learning to see when a human being is alive and poetry in motion. And if we can learn to see that kind of beauty in a boxing ring, a basketball court, a swimming lane, a stage, maybe we can start to notice that this beauty was never limited to athletes and performers in the first place. Act 2, the cultivar of humanity. Here's the philosophical heart of it, and I want to say it plainly. Every flower blooms differently, and a rose is not failing to become an oak. Moss is not lesser than cedar. They were never competing for the same crown. But we build a world that measures everything in height, wealth, status, followers, podium, position. We've gotten very good at counting and very bad at noticing. Flourishing asks a different question of the Flourishing asks a different question than success does. Success asks how high, how fast, how much. Flourishing asks only, did it bloom? I want to take you back to a stone and a mountain, because I think this is where the idea gets its spine. You know the myth. Sisyphus, condemned forever to push a boulder up a mountain, watch it roll back down, and begin again. Camus looked at that punishment and made a decision on Sisyphus' behalf. We must imagine Sisyphus happy, an act of defiance, a willed, chosen happiness, in spite of the boulder. I don't think that's quite it. I don't think the happiness was ever imagined, and I don't think it was ever in spite of the boulder. I think there's a moment, not every push, but some push. Some one unrepeatable push when the man and the stone and the mountain and the whole turning universe stop resisting each other and simply agree. For one moment, everything fits. The grade of the slope, the angle of his shoulder, the weight of the rock, the rhythm of his breath. All of it moving as a single thing instead of four things fighting each other. It's not happiness decided in advance. That's grace arriving on its own terms. And here's the part that took me a while to understand about my own eye for this. The grace is the joy. It isn't grace standing behind happiness like some deeper, more serious cousin. It isn't aesthetics wearing a mask over a feeling. When the man and the stone and the mountain align, the joy isn't a reward that comes after. The joy is what the alignment feels like from inside the body, doing the pushing. Think of a lotus. It doesn't bloom despite the mud. It cannot bloom without it. Mud isn't an obstacle the flower overcomes on its way to something cleaner. The mud is the medium. Take the mud away, and there's no lotus. There's just flat, dry ground with nothing growing on it. So it is with the boulder. The eternity of the task, the certainty that it rolls back down, the punishment itself. It's not the thing that Sisyphus escapes for one graceful second. That's the mud his lotus grows out of. The duty doesn't get canceled by the moment of alignment. It gets redeemed by it, briefly, without ever being erased. That's transcendence through duty, not instead of it. And that changes the question I'm actually asking. Every time I go looking for one of these flowers, I'm not asking, is this person free? I'm asking, is this person fully alive, fluent, unperformed, inside the very thing they were bound to carry? Mona Kimura is still in the ring, taking hits. My cousin, still bound by the rules of the game. The mechanic, the grandmother, the swimmer, still bound to the engine, the dough, the water. The flower blooms under load, not after it's been set down. If we've forgotten how to recognize the flowers blooming under all that weight, I suspect we've also forgotten how to recognize the weeds standing right next to them. Act 3. Where most see weeds, I see history. Nettles, dandelions, the plants people spray off their lawns without a second thought. My people knew better. Depression-era survival taught my ancestors the names of plants we now poison on sight. What fed you when nothing else would? What healed a wound? What got a family through a winter with no money in the house? Where most people driving past see weeds, I see history. I see a name somebody's grandmother knew that nobody in this generation bothered to learn. My father was a coach. He didn't just teach me to watch the scoreboard. He taught me to watch for the moment inside a practice, when a kid's movement and understanding lined up, and something clicked that had nothing to do with the final score. Teachers did the same. They weren't only grading results. The good ones were watching for that flicker. The second a kid's confusion turned into fluency, and they knew enough to notice it, even when nobody else in the room did. That's the same eye, just aimed at a garden instead of a gym. Nettles need flowers nearby, and flowers need nettles too. They hold the soil. They feed what feeds the bees. Oaks need moss at their roots. Thorns belong right next to the blossoms. Pull one, and you weaken the other. The web is beautiful, precisely because it's balanced, not because everything in it is pretty. We've decided some plants are worth keeping, and some are worth killing, mostly by how they look, rarely by what they actually do. I think we've been making the same mistake with people. In closing, carrying the lamp differently. Back to that first flower, blooming somewhere it wasn't supposed to. I don't think the greatest loss of modern life is that we've gotten too busy. I think it's that we've forgotten how to notice. We've gotten very skilled at counting trophies and very out of practice at counting moments. We admire outcomes and call it appreciation. We pull weeds before we ever ask why our grandparents let them grow in the first place. So here's the invitation, and it's a small one, which is the point. This week, go look for a flower blooming in an unusual way. It won't announce itself. It won't be standing in a garden with a ribbon on it. It might be a mechanic, head cocked, listening to an engine the way a doctor listens to a heartbeat. It might be a grandmother kneeling behind bread, kneading bread with hands that have made the exact motion 10,000 times and still mean it. It might be a kid building something in the dirt that no one else understands yet, least of all him. It might be the swimmer gliding through still water, making it look like the water invited her in. Or it might be someone somewhere in the middle of a duty they didn't choose and can't set down, who for one unrepeatable moment stops fighting the weight of it and becomes poetry in motion. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. Faith, family, forward, always. Diogenes, out.